Um, so hi everyone, welcome to this AI event from Shopware United. I hope you can bear with my voice. I'm recovering from quite the heavy flu. So some sneezing and coughing on my bed. I try to mute myself in time, but just bear with me in case I am a little bit too late. So we're today for Shopware United, just to give you an introduction of what Shopware United is for those of you who don't know. Shopware United is the community voice of Shopware. So we are an independent organization. We're actually a charity organization made up of a board by volunteers, people who've been active in e-commerce for quite some while, including myself and Sander, who are hosting this meeting. And Shopware United is a main goal is to unify the community of shopware around the world, especially also outside of the DACH region. So traditionally, Shopware has been very German oriented. And we would like to broaden Shopware's reach and the Shopware community reach to more outside of the German-speaking region. Hence why this presentation is also in English and this discussion will be in English. So a little bit about myself. I've been working in e-commerce for almost 8 years. For the line part of that, I've been working for a hosting company. But recently I joined Dati, based here in the Netherlands, in Eindhoven, which is a composable commerce enterprise that's helping enterprise clients. And I'm joined today by Sander. Sander, maybe you quickly want to introduce yourself.
Sure, thank you. I'm Sander Mangel. I work at Shopware as a solutions architect or consultant, working with merchants, agencies, tech partners to leverage Shopware and to connect to Shopware.
Thank you. So how to participate? We have a panel of 4 people who will introduce themselves shortly to discuss some questions that we've prepared. But before we go in there, I would like to ask you to please keep yourself muted unless you have a question and you are granted to ask that question in the audience. If you have a question, please post it in the chat and then we'll regard it. And then if we deem it valuable to discuss, then we will hand that question to you and then you can unmute yourself. And please be mindful, be kind and respectful to each other. We are all here because we want to learn something and we try to do our best. And I also would like to mention that everyone in this panel is also volunteering to be here. So we really appreciate their time and we hope you do the same. So today we'll start with the solutions panel discussion. I am very excited for the 4 guests I have with me today, Shir, Jelle, Lee, and Timo. And I will ask the 4 of you to introduce yourself. Shir, are you already here?
Yes, I am.
Great. Can you introduce yourself?
Of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Shir. I am the partnerships team lead at Site. So we really, Site's a visual AI solution for online retailers. So I'm super excited to be here today and talk about all things AI and e-commerce with everyone here. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Shir. We're also very happy to have you here. Jelle, could you introduce yourself?
Yes, hello, my name is Jelle. I work at Somnia. We're an AI consulting company. And I work as an analytics translator. So I have the happy job to be in the intersection between business, data, and tech. Happy to be here.
Very cool. Thanks, Jelle, for joining us today. Lee, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, hi, my name is Lee. I'm the lead for EMEA for SpeedSize, and we have visual AI solution to provide the best visual user experience so that companies and websites can use up to 4K quality without losing the traffic by delaying and loading the media. And happy to talk with everybody about the AI parts.
Cool, thank you very much, Lee. And then finally, Timo, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks for having me and for inviting me. So my name is Timo. I work for the partnership team for Agicap. We are a company that provide a cash flow planning and forecasting software tool for merchants. Which is obviously we'll talk about it, but it's a really very painful topic. So I hope that our algorithms and our programming helps to facilitate this very important process in KPI.
Thank you very much, Timo. Okay, I'm very happy to have these four people here who clearly they all have experience with AI and e-commerce. So I'll stop sharing my screen now so that we can hand over to the panel discussion. And the first question that I would like to ask the panel is, when does I become AI? So what makes something AI and not simply software? And maybe we can elaborate a little bit on that by explaining the difference between AI and machine learning. And Timo, you're actually the first one I would like to ask this question to.
So yeah, so I think from our standpoint, it's I think it's something that we always get, and I think it's a buzzword. So what we can say from Agicap, also what we are doing is we leverage data that are already existing and try to make a predictive analysis. So we would actually I think we would actually call it machine learning, what we are doing, instead of like really leveraging data and kind of in a sense that data itself is interpreting itself. So yeah, from our side, I think it's yeah, what we are doing, what we call what our service is doing is rather towards machine learning than AI actually. But I think it's something that is interesting to be discussed, and yeah.
Yeah, I wonder what any of the other panelists have to think about this. Well, just so if you consider indeed buzzwords like machine learning and AI, what would you say is the difference between the two?
Yeah, I think it's very important to understand that AI, of course, it's a buzzword, but it's a technology which actually enables machine learning, right? Machine learning is really like a subset to automatically learn from data, past data. So machine learning is very important for AI, and I think the big difference is that machine learning is a subset for AI, and it's always combined together.
And then what would you say makes AI AI? Like how do we define it?
Yeah, again, I think again it's a buzzword, but I think AI is just what we not can handle as persons, as human beings, with all the data sets that needs to be calculated, and that's why we use machine learning to advance our position with information and data to understand what we need to have as a result. But I think in general, AI consists a lot of important parts, and machine learning is just one of those parts to boost the AI part. As I see from my experience, you need to have like data scientists to ensure the quality. You have to need the right quality data, because bad quality, if you put it in AI with machine learning, it can actually be negative for a company, as an example. But in general, I would say machine learning very important with the right data, with the right data scientist, with the right testing, and AI is just, again, I think from my perspective, a big buzzword, but machine learning is just one part that can improve this. I see also some other people here, also Edward from Broomlich as an example. Very interesting to see that he's also here. Because he worked also with a lot of AI technology, but I'm really curious about other panel members, what they think about this.
Yeah, to add on to what Lee said, I mean, AI is like a field in computer science, right? So it makes a computer system that mimics human intelligence. And then machine learning is essentially a subset of AI, right? Because AI has a bunch of different subfields like neural networks, machine learning, natural language processing, robotics. I mean, like there's a bunch of different subsets within AI, and machine learning is just one of those subsets. And yeah, like at the end of the day, like machine learning and algorithms and deep learning neural networks, machine learning enables a computer system to make predictions by taking historical data and then utilizing that data to improve whatever it is it's trying to solve. So I think that's kind of how I would position it.
Thank you. Do you have anything to add to that, Jelle?
No, yeah, one thing description I like is that it's AI automates a cognitive demanding task. So that's summarized also what Sheer was saying, mimics human intelligence. So that's the one that I normally use.
Okay, cool. Cool. Thank you very much for your explanation, panel. So I think we can move on to the next question. And that is actually a question I would like to firstly direct at Sheer. What challenges in e-commerce are perfect for AI to handle?
I think there are a lot of challenges that AI can solve in terms of e-com. Today, I think AI can help online retailers deliver an optimized customer experience, both on and off their e-commerce website, by collecting business and customer data to make better business decisions and accurately predict different processes or purchasing, whatever it may be that that technology is trying to help solve. But overall, I mean, there's a variety of different challenges it can help solve, like more targeted marketing and advertising, right? So creating personalized product recommendation, that's something that, Site does. So we use machine learning to analyze shoppers' purchasing history and what's going on in the site to be able to really provide accurate personalized recommendations for shoppers. But AI can also help with keep capturing data and then being able to not only capture data, but understand like how to analyze it and then actually like apply it to what's going on your site. Having access to so much data allows retailers to enrich not only what's going on their site, but also on the business decisions that they make. So for example, something that we do is we take the retailer's entire catalog and our visual AI can extract data just from looking at the images in the catalog. That data is something that a lot of retailers don't have. And if they do, sometimes they hire teams of people to just sit there and manually extract the attributes of products themselves. So having an automated system that's able to really, like a human eye, look at an image and understand, okay, what are the attributes that describe that product? Being able to extract that and actually have that data is super powerful, not only to enrich metadata on a site, but also help with inventory management and really so many other challenges that retailers are experiencing today. And that's like in terms of like what I see in terms of working at site, but AI can help with customer retention, automation, pricing optimization. I mean, I think there are so many different challenges that AI can help with, but I'll leave it at that for myself.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, I think it's nice for the audience to hear a little bit more examples of how AI is used for e-commerce. I think Lee, you can also add something to that.
Yeah, definitely. So amazing. I know Site, and I think visual and understanding what the human brain can do or the human eye can see. It's really interesting from a visual AI perspective. So what we do currently at SpeedSize is we understand exactly what a media image or video, how we can see it with our human eye and human brain. And apparently in a market, the number one need is how can we show our products or services as good as possible with high quality media. But on the other hand, the biggest problem is the file size always too big. So with our AI solution, we actually remove all the parts from a media file that we cannot see with the human brain and eye to ensure the optimal quality, like 4K quality, but make the file size up to 99% smaller. So that's really new what's going on in e-commerce market. So visual AI is really, really important to understand what the opportunities are. And also one add-on from Sheer about her story and her feedback. I think it's very interesting to see how AI can work not only with recommendations, with understanding for retention management, but also definitely for the buyers, for the purchasers. to understand, country A has more trending products, let's say white shoes as an example. In another region, with AI, you can really understand which product you should buy and which product should be on stock, and just to have a better stock management as well. Because I saw a plan from Amazon. Basically, they adapt this for the hubs with AI, again, to ensure the optimal stock for the right pricing and for the right margins. So it can go really far. So it's really interesting to see from a customer journey up to returns, how you can improve it with AI.
Great, thank you very much, Lee. Jelle, I'm also wondering what you have to say about this, given your expertise.
Yeah, so e-commerce is it's already in the name. It's a place where a lot of data resides. So what we see mostly, what's already been said before, so personalization, optimizing the shopping experience. So you can think of things, next best action. So showing the relevant content next for the user or the customer, but also more personalized search, showing only certain products that are relevant for that user. But what we build a lot for customers is also ranking of products, so recommenders, so showing the most relevant content first. But what I've mentioned before is also more in the in the stock availability, into forecasting certain demands from factories or shifting loads into factories. We've done it for a big retailer. But loads of examples, but also in the terms of security. So anomaly detection, seeing what are false users in certain processes are really relevant topics as well.
Cool, thank you very much for that. Timo, I'm wondering, do you have anything to add to this?
So what I think is interesting is like the most examples that were discussed, and I think a lot of innovation is from the perspective everything around the customer. So like recommendations, pricing, demand, what sells best where, etc. So like kind of front office stuff. So like cash flow. So like cash flow, like for instance, right? It's like a back office process. What is cash flow doing? Maybe just it just tells you, okay, like how much money do I have at some point to buy, invest? Could be stock, but could be like general expenses that you have in your company and sales floating in, right? So something like a topic that we widely get is obviously in e-commerce is like at what time. So I see, I can see how much I sell on via shop, and I can see what the demand is, but I cannot make this link towards my whole the situation in my financial situation of my company. So the link of demand side, stock side towards cash of the overall company. So which gives me which provides a frame to me as a company owner of what I can spend at some point. So like cost side and income side combined is a huge problem. And I think a lot of innovation happens on this front face to the customer side. And what we are seeing, and I would not dare to say that we solve this issue because it's very complex, but what we see is that is a problem is to combine those to make a relevant prediction. So if you have stock or if your stock goes down, you need to, when is the right time to reorder, then you have a certain other external factors, like right now, like problems in the supply chain that also play a role in this. So I think the idea, or like the hope of the merchants, is to have a better predictive analysis on when to make a new order that is combined out of what is your stock, what's the demand, and how much cash you have. And this is a problem that we try to tackle somehow, but it's very complex, since you need like at least if we talk about merchants that are like medium-sized, maybe don't have the financial funds to buy like a very individual and customized enterprise solution or have someone to help. And this is a topic that, yeah, we try to investigate in more and more to make better predictions, to help merchants to further fuel their growth based on cash. So that's, I mean, a very concrete example where this more research needs to be done and better solution needs to be developed.
And Timo, so what you're meaning also is to centralize your data more. What I also see at more clients also in the e-commerce side, that they have to, first step is to centralize their data coming from all different platforms, Google Analytics or Shopify, and they want to predict stuff, but they don't have it in one place. Is that also a challenge at your business?
Yeah, I mean, yes. So like first thing I think is that you that you're able to get all the data sources in one place and then make sense out of it. So that's definitely also like problematic, because most things that can be done is like around your different shops or different platforms that you're on, and the demand side, so you can bring this kind of together, but the cost side is completely missing, like your rents, your salaries, your marketing, maybe you can online marketing spend, you can kind of get this also into it, but you have a lot of other like administrative stuff. And combining this is yeah, it's a huge challenge, and that's kind of our task to like that's our task, but it's very challenging. Yeah, but it's kind of what you're saying, like first is to bring all the data sources together and then making sense out of it. This is something that we get always from merchants, and then obviously in the medium-sized, so have a scalable solution, not very individualized solutions that are then quite costly at the end.
Thank you so much. I think it's really interesting to hear like the different ways that AI can be applied in e-commerce. I have to say I'm quite new to the subject myself, and when I first thought of it, I thought more like, okay, if you go online shopping for clothes, then you could use AI, for instance, to try on an outfit to see if it actually fits. But now hearing all of you and the different ways that you use AI, I see that there's so much more that you can actually do with it. So I think it's really interesting for merchants to consider, AI for their shop. And that actually leads me to the next question, which is, if I'm a merchant and I'm considering AI, what makes a good AI? What traits should I evaluate when I consider AI? And I would actually like to open this to the panel. Is there anyone who would like to answer this?
I have some thoughts.
Okay, please go ahead.
Yeah, so sometimes I'm addressed as anti-AI because I see it is sometimes pushed upon as a solution that solves everything. But most of the times you can have an easier business rules like solution. What I normally also see at our clients, that they say, I want a big, important deep learning model, which is really fancy, but actually costs more time and doesn't really solve the problem, or in a really difficult way. So a good AI solves the problem. So putting an AI as a means to an end. And also what you see is that it keeps lingering in the experimentation phase. So it's, yeah, you have the outputs in a notebook model and you see it put out somewhere, but it's never in production. So a good AI is also embedded in the processes, if concerns me, but it's also, yeah, it solves the problem. It's in production, but it's also compliant to legal and GDPR laws, and it's trustworthy. So if a business user does not trust the AI model, it will never use it. We're all humans, and if something doesn't work the first time, we will most likely stop using it.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think so. I think so too. Is there anyone else who would like to say something about this?
Yes, so I think in general, first of all, companies need to understand the midterm and long-term goals, right? And understand which kind of AI they would like to test, to use. But I would always say, you never know if the AI is good if you never test it. So I always am a person that, test before you know if it's good for your company and based on your goals. And again, don't think about very short goals, like I use AI to convert 20% more next month. It's possible, but think on the long term, because you have competition, you have higher advertisement prices for PPC campaigns. So you have a lot of goals to improve. So based on that, you need to understand which AI technologies and companies are there, and just test it to understand what it can do for your business. So that's my general answer on this.
Thank you, Lee. Actually, Jelle, I think you touched upon an important subject when you mentioned that AI should be compliant with GDPR and privacy. I think this is something that concerns merchants when they are choosing AI. Is how can we be compliant with GDPR and privacy laws while AI is targeting specific users? So I was wondering, Shir, if you could tell us something about that.
Yeah, so I mean, this is something that we touch on a lot. So I'd say, we have a chief information security officer, and he kind of is responsible for all things privacy, compliance, right? Even, accessibility falls into that as well in terms of compliance online nowadays as well. And so we do a lot of like different studies and research analysis and understanding, one, what's, how can you be the most compliant, but also how can you respect people's privacy and their information? And so we saw that McKinsey did like a research, I think about a year ago, and they saw that 80% of consumers want retailers to offer personalized experiences. But then when Entrust, which is like an IT security firm, did a research study, 79% of people said they're concerned about their privacy online. So like, it's kind of like walking in between both of those lines. Like, how are you going to provide a personalized experience when also, respecting everyone's privacy? So naturally, this applies to experiences powered by AI online. And one of the most pressing questions that retailers have when they come to us is whether, the visual AI solutions is going to collect the personal shopper data. And the answer to this is that trusted visual AI vendors should not collect or store personal data from shoppers, and this includes images. So, for example, our visual AI solution has a camera search capability. People will upload images, right? Because our algorithm scans the image, scans the entire catalog, and says, here are all the visually similar products on the website, and here are the products that you're looking for. So you can actually search by image. And a big question we get is, wait, but are you storing those images that shoppers are uploading, right? Because sometimes it's like a picture of something in their home or a picture of their friend wearing a shirt. And the answer is no, like you shouldn't store that information, because that's people's personal images, and they're using it to actually just search for something for their own benefit, because it's easier for them to search by image. So like simple things like that, like making sure that you're respecting people's privacy, whether it's like they're using search capabilities, whether it's the information you're collecting. Just overall, it's also important to use like anonymized data. So make sure like things remain anonymous as well. That's already collected by the retailer in order to enable real-time optimization and customer experience for whatever the AI is trying to do on the e-commerce site. So again, like one of the great advantages of visual AI solutions is the fact that you can rely on a wealth of data, like cut or color or size or whatever it may be, rather than the personal data, right, of the actual person that's looking things up. And since brands and retailers today are also making ongoing efforts to actually, ensure GDPR, CCPA compliance, it's important to note that vendors in general should operate in a manner described as I just described it, to make sure they're compliant with both GDPR, or if you're based in the US, it's sometimes it's like the Americans with Disabilities Act, making sure that your solutions are also accessible for those who are shopping online. So I mean, it's just asking the right questions to make sure that they're doing things the right way, especially with the laws in the region that you're operating in.
Great, thank you. Jelle, do you have anything to say about this? Like, do you run into this often? This balance between privacy and GDPR and the usage of AI?
Yes, especially in the public domain. It's you're working with personal data from civilians or customers for organizations. So what I would say a best practice is to involve legal officers, privacy officers at the beginning and not at the end, as a mistake I've made in the past. And also to be completely transparent. And sometimes human involvement is sometimes necessary to evaluate certain decisions, and also to keep the ethical aspect in balance. So never always strive for full automation, but try to optimize the process.
Great, thank you. I was also wondering if I, as a merchant, deliver input for AI, what kind of impact does this have? So does my data quality impact how well AI is trained or performs? And I was wondering, Timo, if you could shed some light on this.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a paradox that I always see. Like so many times, there is not enough data foundation to actually which is the basis to then run kind of calculations or algorithms on. And so this is at least in the, let's say, in the medium-sized segment that we are in, it's not always available, you know. And then that's always also like kind of answering the, I think, two questions before. So people want AI, but what can you offer to actually run, like in our case, like predictive analysis? This is kind of the gap that we are seeing. And I think this is this is kind of problematic, because people expect, without the right data sources, to deliver like magic solutions. And so at least in the medium segment, at least for in the space that we operate in, we need way more data sources in to make like proper predictions. And the risk that I'm seeing is that there is this demand for it without a certain understanding. And then if you apply those kind of models and then you predict, I mean, people rely on it, and then you predict something, or you don't have the foundation to predict something that is rather wrong, but people rely on it, they outsource their brain, and then they get wrong predictions. In our case, based on cash flow, this can decide for like survival, growth, or bankruptcy of a company, worst case, obviously. But still, I mean, I think there's it's a very dangerous thing. So in our case, I have to say, like, I think getting all those data foundations first, and then running some algorithms on top is much needed. And in the space we are operating in, we don't see it as that the foundation is there yet.
Yeah, I totally agree, Timo. I think most important is that you really can use machine learning with hypotheses. So you need to do these hypotheses to understand the quality of the data and how to improve it. So, and again, you need a lot of data to have the right results.
Thank you, guys. We actually have a question from the audience coming in. How does the black box nature of AI affect retailers' understanding of their customers and segments, demand, etc.?
Can I add a bit to that? I mean,
yeah, sure.
The problem is that sometimes if you deploy AI, it's a black box thing that you're deploying, and the problem is you may end up doing the right thing but not knowing why. And I know you've slightly addressed that already, Timo, just a couple of minutes ago, and that becomes a major problem, because actually now you're not gaining in the understanding of why this thing matters. How is AI addressing this, and is this a worry?
I have something just to add, and I don't know if this is going to answer your question, but let me know if it does or doesn't. I think a really big thing in terms of really having that true, right? It's like, because sometimes people consider it like opaque, right? You want like true transparency into like what's going on and the data behind it. And that data part is super important. And I think a big question, and we get this a lot from retailers that we speak with, is how do I understand what's going on behind the scenes? That's the question, right? Like, how do I know that this is actually helping my site? And so a lot of the times it's showing them exactly how transparent the nature of our solution works. And we, in terms of BI and analytics, we use something called Tableau. And Tableau is really the source of truth for many of our clients, because it really shows them exactly like, this is what's going on in your site. This is exactly, and I'm talking about Insight's perspective because I work at Site, so I can give you from the way I see it, but it's more like, this is the numbers that you're seeing on your site, and here are the numbers that we're affecting. These are the number of users that interacted with our solution. These are the number of users that their conversion rate was affected by the solution, and really going ahead and having full transparency on the data that's going on their site, so they see the exact impact that the technology had on their shoppers' experience. And trying to be as transparent as possible is the best way and the best course of action, because if your technology is actually as good as you say it is, your clients should be able to see that and have full access to that as well.
Yeah, I'd like to add, what we really like to do is to work from the get-go, from moment one with the end user. So if you take the end user along in your process of developing a model, then at the end, it is transparent for them how the process came to mind.
Surely that is
Thank
not
you,
AI.
guys.
Surely
Sorry.
then it's not AI. It's a managed data service.
Oh, like the Tableau, for example, like what we're using to aggregate the data and show it to the clients, correct?
But the very fact that if you're walking things through it, then we're not talking about AI. We're talking about algorithms with managed data processes behind them.
I guess, I mean, at the end of the day, and I'm not on the machine learning team, I can definitely, if you want to have a call with our machine learning team, more than happy to bring them on a call.
Oh, don't worry, I'm just being the devil's advocate here.
No,
I love to throw the grenade in the middle there.
No,
and
I'm
going to cut you off at that, Justin, because we're actually coming to the end of our solutions panel. But I do have one final question, actually, for the entire panel. I would really be happy for you to answer, to hear your two answers. And that is, what do you expect is going to be the next big thing in AI? So how will it be implemented like 5 years down the road? And I would actually like to hear from all of you, but if you could keep it brief, please, because we're actually running a bit out of time. Cher, would you like to start?
Sure.
Yeah.
This will be the last time you hear from me, and then I'll be done.
Hopefully not, but maybe this time.
I think AI can help merchants make better future predictions about sales, provide better customer support, retarget customers, who got away. I think it can really help a lot of retailers with their strategies online. And given that, the success in this field is all about improving the shopper experience and, going beyond just the simple good enough, it's essential that retailers consider carefully the credentials of visual AI technology vendors when deciding, who to partner with. Beating rather than meeting retailer and shopper expectations is the goal, to kind of be one step ahead. And the thing about your e-commerce store is that it's always open, right? This means that it's even open when you're sleeping, and thankfully, because of technologies and solutions, right? Like even like customer support chatbots on your website, right? Like something like that, right, provides a very good customer service to your shoppers, even when no one's actually working. So I think really using technologies that can help empower your shop and really kind of strengthen the parts that may be weaker in the organization is something that can really help any organization and facilitate more seamless experiences.
Great, thank you. Timo, do you have anything to add? Or do you agree?
I mean, I think that technology should serve the merchants to improve the processes. I mean, I think this is correct, and this is probably true to all areas of operations. So for us, it's as I said at the beginning, it's a back office process, a very relevant one, but something to bear in mind. And the expectation of the merchants is that you spend less time with less time with getting an overview of what you need to see, like in our sense, like cash and how much cash you have and will have. So the time spent to get there should decrease by using technology, and just to focus on what to make sense out of this. So I think this is for every back office process, because at the end of the day, you want to grow, you want to further sell products, and the more time you spend with back office processes, maybe the less time you have to think about your customer. So I think that's the perspective that the merchants expect from companies like us. And my prediction is, and also the hope is, that we get enough data sources to make this expectation reality, which, as I said before, for at least for our use case, I don't think we are already there. But I think, yeah, that's where it's going at some point.
Great, thanks. Lee?
Yes, I will keep it short and simple. I believe the combination of AI, AR, VR, or say differently, metaverse for retail will be the big thing.
Great, thank you. And Jelle, final words for you?
Yeah, I think we're moving a bit like 10 years ago when you wanted to develop a website, it was very code heavy. But a week ago, I clicked the website in a few hours without having to code anything. And I think we're moving towards the auto ML side of things. You see all the big cloud providers really pushing on it. I think for the simpler models, I think merchants can click an AI model in 5 years.
Great, thank you so much. I really want to thank all of you for participating and sharing your thoughts today. Personally, I thought it was very insightful and helpful to sort of hear how AI can be applied in e-commerce and in what different ways. So thank you very much for that. I will now actually give the floor to Sander.
Right. Thank you so much. That was very interesting. I think what's coming up next will put all of this a little bit in context. Before we move on with the tech panel, we actually have 2 case studies that we want to share with you. And let me just figure out which screen I should be sharing. Let's try this one. Let's hope it's nothing embarrassing. You should be seeing an agenda. So first we'll be talking to Ben, who is CTO at the Fish Society, about their way of leveraging AI in their web shop. And afterwards we'll be talking with Yannick Rüssler, who is a student who has been applying machine learning to reduce customer churn. So those are the 2 case studies that we'll listen to, both 15 minutes. Afterwards we'll jump into the tech panel discussion. Let's get started with Ben. Ben, are you still online?
I am still here, yes. Hello.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so I guess a little bit of an intro. I'm Ben. I'm CTO at the Fish Society. We're a small company in England that sell frozen fish directly to the consumer, so it's completely B2C. And we're on Shopware, and we've got various partners which utilize sort of third-party plugins, extensions that utilize AI. And throughout my time, we've tried quite a few of them. I just thought it'd be good to give a bit of a merchant's perspective of what we as merchants look out for or should be considering when we're trying to, assess a third-party AI provider.
Brilliant. Right. So online fishmonger. I've never bought fish online, to be honest. Paint me a picture of what kind of a target audience you have. It's B2C, right?
It's completely B2C, and our audience is we're very much on the luxury end of the market. So we're not trying to replace like stuff that you can buy in a supermarket or any other normal shop. We've got the very exotic, the very high end, that sort of thing. So we've got high end caviar, the lobster, that sort of thing. So we've also got the widest range. So we sell over 200 different kinds of fish. So if you want variety, you want quality, that's what we do really. And obviously we're trying to target the upper middle class to the upper to the rich people. Really that's our bread and butter.
Right. So no fish and chips after a night of drinking or what have you.
No, we do. I mean,
Got
we
it.
are increasingly focusing on a little bit like meal kits, because that everyone wants to be like, not everyone knows how to cook all the fish, so we're trying to focus more on like, not ready meals,
Right.
but things that have been had some preparation or marinated or something, so people can do it easier. Because we found that we've launched our own range of like pre-prepared stuff, and that's gone really well. So yeah.
Brilliant. And how are you folding AI and machine learning into that kind of an offering and that kind of a target audience with Shopware?
So we use AI in product recommendations. We use it in emails and email flows. We use it for our search has got AI. We have in the past used chatbot technology as well on our website, although we have since discontinued that particular feature. So yeah, I mean, and obviously all the marketing stuff, we've got brochures that we send out, like catalog brochures that we send out. We use AI for that. Obviously all the marketing, like the online auctioning and all that Google shopping and all that, that's all AI driven. So that's all, I mean, even though that's not a vendor that we directly chose, yeah, so AI is used in all those areas as well.
Right. And so how do you identify a task or process within your e-commerce operations that you want to leverage AI for?
So if I'm like assessing an AI third-party provider, I think that the key thing to look at, and I think obviously this has just been touched on. So I think a lot of the things I'd planned to say had already been touched on. So unfortunately, you guys have stolen my thunder a little bit. But I think Timo was touching on this. I think one of the key things is that you've got to meet the threshold for what the AI, you've got to have enough interactions, enough whatever you're trying to provide. So we have in the past, when we were a lot smaller, tried AI solutions and they just went haywire. And it turned out it's just because we didn't have enough throughput. And I think sometimes when you're talking to a salesperson for some of these providers, they're a little bit sketchy on exactly, because they're trying to make the sale. So it's always good for a provider to be upfront. Well, we need this much before it's worthwhile you taking up the service. That's always a good one to look out for. Another thing that I really look for in a provider is, would I use this service if the AI wasn't part of it? Because the AI is just providing like cognitive, easiness and cognitive load that you can offload onto the AI. But is the service worthwhile without the AI involved at all? So that you can then look at that and go, okay, is this a worthwhile service without any AI? And then you can think, okay, so the AI is just like a value add on top of whatever service you're trying to implement. And then you can start to, say, okay, well, I don't have to do all this stuff manually. I don't have to do any, so that's sort of like how I approach it when I assess a solution.
Right. That does sound very sensible. And then is that mostly stuff that you're doing on the front end, or are you automating also some business processes on the back end? What does that look like?
It's so pretty much all the AI focused stuff we have is customer focused. So it's all basically customer focused front end stuff. The back end, we've got a warehouse management system that handles all the orders and all the stock keeping and the predictions and all that. That's actually completely bespoke and built by me. And while I would love to use AI in my solution, I'm not quite at that level yet, because I'm a single developer and there's only so many hours in the day. So yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, and maybe you need a little bit more development time before you just unleash AI on the warehouse, right?
Yeah. I mean, from that point of view, I've always found that you can use very, rudimentary algorithms to not obviously nowhere near the level of AI, but you can get good enough predictions and good enough processes and management systems without actually, using machine learning. Yeah. I mean, obviously, maybe, we're still a small company with only like 20 people working here. So if we explode and become much bigger, these processes will probably require more automation than they currently do. But yeah.
And so you briefly touched on this, but you mentioned that you had AI experience where the system basically ran haywire because you didn't have enough throughput or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
How do you measure effectiveness of an AI algorithm in a service? Do you set certain KPIs that you want to reach? How do you handle that?
Yeah, so obviously it's looking at the before and after of the exact service. So if you're implementing a search function, for example, that previously was just standard but now has AI, you obviously want to have a good sort of good baseline before you transition to know, okay, these are the numbers, these are the figures. Then you turn on or you switch over to your AI solution. How much has that improved? How many more people are interacting with it? How many more people are finding what they're searching for? Stuff like that. There's also some manual testing that we involve in where you just interact with the service yourself as if you were a customer and see whether or not it's giving you the results you would expect, things like that. To just yeah, I mean as I say, a lot of these have got a lower limit, and underneath that limit, it should really ideally have a good fallback where it's just using normal sort of algorithms but sometimes it can get fuzzy and yeah, I don't know the exact under the hood, but a lot of it is just matching people up in a closed search space, and it's just, I'm not exactly sure the exact machine learning, how it's weighted, what the training data is, but sometimes it can be a bit rough, but you just got to be prepared for that.
That makes sense. And what is normally like the timeline to see some return on investment when you start to layer in AI into some of the things that you're already doing? Is it something that I will see the next month, or does it take time to ramp up?
For most AI solutions, it's a bit of a slow burn. I mean, some of them aren't directly focused on. I mean, most of them are directly focused on sales, but some of them are. Like, if you're switching over to like you're turning on Google Smart Shopping, it takes a good month for the algorithm to learn, anything, and then so you've just got a month of training. So you disregard that, or you more or less say, okay, that's just a month of whatever, it's learning your pattern, and then after the next few weeks you assess whether or not it's giving you the right results. And I think most AI solutions, they have a training period built in where you would expect it to just be learning your particular demographic, your particular user, your particular everything, and then but I would expect after the first month, if it's still not doing anything for you, then you've got to obviously look at it a bit more closely. But yes, I would expect after about a month for most solutions, it should be. I mean, some solutions it's almost instant, so yeah, it really depends on the exact vendor and the exact model that you're trying to apply, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then in preparation of turning on those services, did you do any data curation? I think it's clear that with AI there's a bit of garbage in, garbage out, right? If you're pushing in, let's say, orders from 10 years ago, different kind of business model, what have you, did you do a bit of a cleanup for that, or just do a subsection of your data where you said, okay, we'll just use the orders or customers from the last year that we feed into that system?
Yeah, we tend to take more recent data, but this is, I guess, again, depending on what sort of what sort of service you're trying to provide to your customer. So we have significantly shifted our demographics since the beginning of COVID, where our business has just exploded when COVID and all the supermarkets shut down their fish counters. So a lot of people went online and started buying from us, and this has brought in a new, younger demographic for us. So our demographics have significantly shifted, and we actually saw that some of the AI solutions we were using were still trying to apply the older, trying to sort of ape back to the older stuff because it was already implemented when the shift happened. So we had to do a bit of a refresh, as it were, for some of that stuff to try and clear out things like that. But yeah, I mean, you do want to curate it a little bit. You don't want to just chuck whatever. You do want to think about it a little bit before you jump in, I think. And I think that will really, if you do that, if you're a little bit more careful, it gives you a good head start rather than just, it basically shortens the training period, I think, significantly.
Yeah, that's clear. So you've basically done your homework here. You're a CTO. Is that the ideal role to take this on, or is this something that the e-commerce manager should be leading in terms of a project? Like, what kind of a skill should I be having if I want to start introducing AI in my company? Is there some homework I should be doing?
I'm not sure I can answer that because I'm the CTO, but I'm like the only tech person in the office. So all of this
CTO by default,
on my shoulders. I'm not sure. I don't have a big team underneath me, but I'm like, oh yes, I can. No. But as far as homework goes, I think it's just good to keep abreast of the space in general. Be a little bit, you don't have to know exactly what the machine learning does or exactly what models your vendor will be implementing, but just generally knowing what AI is, and generally, knowing that a lot of these will be machine learning, and sort of the general pattern of what machine learning does, essentially, with neural networks and all that stuff. It gives you a better, it basically makes you more prepared for what to expect when you implement some of this. But a lot of the companies that we've partnered with, if you ask the vendor questions, usually you can have a call with a tech person rather than a salesperson, and they will have, they're usually quite frank and quite honest with you about what they're doing, how they do it. And I think if you're as a vendor looking to jump in, that's a good place to, I mean, obviously they're biased in favor of their own solution, but the techie people, they're usually quite frank and quite honest about how it works and what they're doing. And I think a little bit of peek behind the curtain can give you a leg up.
Brilliant. And maybe to close this off, what's the next area that you want to apply AI to in your setup? And think that sparked your interest maybe in the previous panel, and think that you're keen on introducing?
So we're not actually currently looking for any new AI partners. Visual AI, which I'd never honestly considered. Which some of these people...
I want to make a picture of my fish.
Yeah, exactly. I wouldn't. We've never considered it, just because we're not in that. Like, if you're a fashion brand, it's much more relevant to you, I think, than us as a fish brand. But I think maybe what we have experimented in the past with, and have failed, but we didn't use machine learning AI, was a sort of questionnaire type thing where, you want to cook a meal, but you're not sure what it is. Go through, asks you intelligent questions, and you'll come out with, not only a fish, but also the other ingredients that you need for your meal type deal. Something like that would but that would be more of a bespoke solution rather than an off-the-rack third-party vendor, and that's a whole bigger project than something just. Yeah, but I mean, and I think there's a lot is going to be done with, implementing voice. I've noticed some websites in the last year or so have started implementing voice. Like you can voice search Google, you can now voice search these websites. I think things like that. I think that's in the short term. That's where it'll start going, and I'm not sure about the long term, but yeah.
Very exciting. Thank you so much for sharing the insights. Very interesting to hear it from your perspective, from the merchant perspective.
No problem.
Appreciate it. Well, thank you. And before we go on to the tech panel, we will have a short presentation from Yannick, another case study on preventing customer churn with machine learning. So Yannick, I'll turn over the Zoom room to you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Actually, I prepared some slides. Let me try to share them. I think it's that one. Okay, I hope you can see the slides. Perfect. Okay, thank you so much, Sander. Yeah, today I want to give you a little presentation about how we had a cooperation here at the University of Cologne, where we have the customer to reduce customer churn. And before I go a little bit more into detail, actually, I want to introduce myself. So my name is Yannick. I'm a PhD student at the University of Cologne, and prior to that, I did my bachelor and master's in information systems, also at the University of Cologne. And I also have some working experiences. For example, I've been granted the opportunity to conduct research at the MIT. It was mostly concerned about deep learning, computer vision, and facial emotion recognition. And today, my research is mainly about machine learning with a focus on causal targeting, uplift modeling, predictive analytics. And in fact, today, I want to talk a little bit about uplift modeling, what it is, and how we used it to help the customer reduce customer churn. And I think the reason why I'm here today is my fascination in AI, computer science, and in technology in general. Okay, so let's jump into the business case. So first, I want to introduce the overall goal of the project. So I don't want to give you too much detail about the company, but you can just think of the company as, the company, they offered green electricity and gas to private households as well as to small and medium-sized companies. And they had contract-based relationships, meaning that they had contracts which usually lasted for 1 or 2 years, ensuring a fixed price or fixed cost for electricity and gas prices. And the company, they realized that keeping customers was much cheaper than acquiring new customers. So they approached us asking, how can we make customers stay? So the overall goal of this project is to reduce churn. And we did so by actually coming up with 2 sub-projects. The first one, we called it the churn score. So the goal of this project was to identify contracts which are highly likely to be canceled. So the idea is to use machine learning or data science to predict the churn score probability for each contract. And then if we succeed, we wanted to continuously evaluate active contracts regarding their churn score probability, such that the company knows which contract is going to be, or is at least highly likely to be canceled. And then to not only identify customers churning or contracts getting churned, but also to treat them, to treat the customers accordingly, we decided to optimize the marketing campaign of the company using uplift modeling. So the second project is all about optimizing the marketing campaign to reduce customer churn by treating the right customers. And uplift modeling in a nutshell, and I will talk about it a little more detail in the next slides. But in a nutshell, uplift modeling is all about predicting the incremental effect of a treatment on customer churn. So what does that mean? Basically means that we want to predict how the treatment is influencing the customer behavior, in that case, customer churn. And you can think of the treatment as basically everything, but usually in a marketing context, just think of the treatment as a discount on the next contract, for example. And uplift modeling is able to identify different groups of customers. So maybe there are customers who are going to accept the offer and they extend their contract. And maybe there are others who are not going to accept the offer. And maybe there are even others who are offended by the offer. So the overall goal of uplift modeling is to use uplift modeling to send the treatments, in this case, the offers, to customers who are going to extend their contract because or only because of the treatment. So to go a little bit more into detail into the first project, the churn score, actually, so what we did is we developed a machine learning pipeline. And you can see here, let's say, typical building blocks of a machine learning pipeline, from data pre-processing to training the algorithms up to the prediction of the churn scores. And I don't want to go too much into detail, but I want to give you some examples. So for example, the first step in such a pipeline is to actually build the data set, meaning we need to collect the data or information about our customers. We need to, in machine learning, we call that, or in data science, we call it feature engineering. We need to remove maybe unnecessary or unimportant information. We need to deal with missing values in our data sets, all that stuff. And then eventually we will train multiple machine learning algorithms based on the data set we created in the previous steps. So then we will train these algorithms, we will evaluate them according to some metrics, and then eventually we will predict, in this case, we will predict the churn score probability for each contract using the best model. And so the result of this project was that we achieved 91% precision. So what does that mean? Actually, it means that the contracts that are canceled, identified by the pipeline, are really going to be canceled in 91% of the cases, meaning that this pipeline really helps in identifying contracts which are highly likely to be canceled, right? So we decided to put this pipeline into production, and we deployed it such that it automatically evaluates all active contracts each week regarding the churn score probability. Okay, so let's dive into detail, or let's dive into detail regarding the second project, optimizing the marketing campaigns. So I already briefly introduced uplift modeling, but I think I need to introduce it a little bit more, and I need to explain a little bit more. So, and I think the best way to explain it is by demonstrating the different customer groups it can detect. So in a typical marketing campaign, we can distinguish between 4 customers, depending on whether the customer received the treatment and whether the customer responded to the treatment. So for example, here in this graphic, you can see in the upper left corner, the lost causes. These are customers who do not react to the company with or even without the treatment, meaning it's totally worthless if you treat these customers, right? And the same is true for sure things. So these are customers who would react to the company even without the treatment. So again, treating these customers is not really worth it because they will stay with the company anyway. And then in the upper right corner, you can see the sleeping dog. So these are the customers who, they react negatively to the treatment, but they react positively if they do not receive a treatment. Meaning that treating these customers is especially concerning because, if you treat them, they will churn, but if you're not, they will stay. And then in the lower left corner, you can see the persuadables. So these are the customers we really want to treat because they stay with the company just because of the treatment. So, and the thing about uplift modeling is that it is able to identify these, customer groups in advance, such that we know which customers we should treat. So the second project, again, to not only predict the customer churn, what we did in project 1, but to also prevent customers from churning, is now that we wanted to use uplift modeling to optimize the marketing campaign of the company on an individual level, meaning that we wanted to, for each customer, we wanted to know whether we should treat him or her, or if we should not. So what we did in cooperation with the company is we first created an appealing treatment. Just think of a discount on the next contract. And then we extensively collected data from randomized controlled experiments or A/B tests. And that is because uplift modeling needs that type of data. And randomized controlled experiments, actually, it's really straightforward. It's just you take your customer base and then you split it into 2 groups. There's a control group and then there's a treatment group. All the customers in the treatment group, they are subject to the treatment, to the discount on the next contract, while all the customers in the control group, they are not subject to any treatment. And this process, it took over a year. It was really laborious and time consuming. And it just, we just did it in the first place because we needed the data, So after we have collected the data, we developed what we call an uplift modeling framework. And basically, this framework is all about systematically evaluating, different algorithms to predict this incremental effect and to, calculate a score for each customer, which represents whether we should treat the customer or not. And when we, in the very end, we came up with our final model. And to evaluate our ideas in this model, we used 2 optimized marketing campaigns, meaning that we again, we kind of used this randomized controlled experiments, but this time was not really randomized. And that, the customers in the treatment group were optimized by our algorithm, and that we only treated the customers in the treatment group if our algorithm told us to do so. So I think the results were really promising and interesting because we found that the company was characterized by 2 types of customers: by sure things, so customers who stay with the company with or without treatment, and by sleeping dogs, so the customers who churn because of the treatment, but who stay if they do not receive the treatment. Meaning that the overall conclusion is that the company must treat the customers, individually, because there are so many sure things and sleeping dogs customers types. We need to, or the company should avoid treating them to ultimately save costs and reduce churn. And so we can say in sum that uplift modeling was really helping to identify these different customer groups, making it highly valuable to the company to optimize their marketing campaigns. And actually, that's it already from my side. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Yes, when will this be on GitHub and where can we download it?
Oh, actually, that's a good point. So this uplift modeling framework, it will be on GitHub really within the next week. Yeah.
Right. If you can share me that link, we'll make sure that it gets tweeted out because this is very interesting stuff. Very cool.
Yeah, and there, the idea of this framework, which I find really interesting, is that you just put in, some data set coming from such randomized controlled experiments, and what you will get is a list of customer scores telling you which customers to treat and not to treat. So that's really amazing.
Really cool. Thank you so much for joining, and I think this is a very good introduction to our next panel, actually, which you're also participating to. It's with 3 participants. We have Ayla Kangur, Guido Parente, and Yannick Rössler. I'll let you all introduce yourself. Ayla, would you like to kick off?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Ayla. I've studied artificial intelligence, both a bachelor and a master, and I have 7 years of experience as a machine learning engineer now. And I've worked in several domains, so not e-commerce, but I've used machine learning techniques in recommender systems, entity disintegration, anomaly detection in the IT landscape. Also, one of my interesting projects that I really liked was analyzing financial transactions to try to predict which citizens are more at risk of getting into very severe debt. So the government could more easily reach out to them beforehand, before it was too late, and get them on a customized paying plan. I work at Slimmer AI, which is a venture studio. We co-build and invest in AI startups in the B2B space. And in my current role, I mostly focus on defining the long-term AI strategy of companies.
Thank you so much. And the next, Guido.
Hi, everyone. My name is Guido. I'm a software engineer, and as part of curated data, I'm focusing on machine learning tools to solve some e-commerce challenges. But I'm used to build the different products for very different domains, very different clients. So my approach on the topic is that machine learning is one device in my toolbox. So I can go to machine learning tools to solve challenges. And this was said before, and I completely agree that we should always go from the problem to the tool. So we should analyze the problem. That's my practical way of thinking about it. And we may decide that machine learning is a good thing to do or don't. So I have a very hands-on, practical, product focused approach.
Thank you. And last, Yannick, maybe you already introduced yourself, but just 5 seconds.
Okay. So again, my name is Yannick. I'm a PhD student at the University of Cologne, and my research interest is just in AI in general, and especially machine learning, and just applying machine learning on any business case. I just found it really, really interesting. Yeah.
All right. Perfect. So let's get started with the questions, and just. This is totally not premeditated, but Ayla, can you tell us a little bit about getting started with AI and what is the breakdown here? Machine learning, AI, deep neural visuals, etc. What does it mean? While you tell us, I'll bring up a slide.
Yes. You told me that you were going to ask this question, so I sent you this image to help you clear it up a bit as well. So I think it was mentioned in the first panel a bit as well. Artificial intelligence really is the big overarching field here. It was born in the 1950s, and it comprises of several methods. So machine learning is one of them, which is a statistical learning approach to artificial intelligence. And then right from the start, there were other approaches as well that try to solve the problem of how can we make the computer do an intelligent task with more of a symbolic approach, rule-based systems. And those were used a lot in the first few decades after the 1950s. So we had very big expert systems, very smart search algorithms were developed in the time. But after a while, even though machine learning was always there right from the start, machine learning started to become more practical. There were some breakthroughs also in the field of neural networks, which is just one type of machine learning algorithm that is out there. We have a lot of other machine learning algorithms, such as decision trees or support vector machines or logistic regression. There was a breakthrough in neural networks, which is called backpropagation, which helped make neural networks function better. So this was in the 80s actually already. But then it took a couple more years. I think it was around 2010, or most people say 2012, that deep learning became really a big thing. And deep learning is basically just a really big neural network. So a neural network consists of a lot of interconnected nodes. And in deep learning, you have a lot of those nodes, and they're stacked one after each other, layers of connected nodes. Yeah, so that is basically how the fields tie into each other. And then we have things like natural language processing and computer vision. And I have to say there's no clearly defined definition of artificial intelligence. So you could say that NLP is artificial intelligence. I like to say that NLP also uses techniques which I wouldn't even call artificial intelligence. They're just basic algorithms. So this is why I put them on in this circle like this. So NLP can use deep learning techniques, other machine learning algorithms, but it consists of more than that. And the same holds for computer vision.
Right. Fantastic. Thanks so much. We'll also share this image afterwards.
Actually,
yeah,
can
go
I
ahead,
add a few?
Yes.
Actually, when somebody asks me what's the difference between machine learning and deep learning and AI, I usually, pull out exactly this diagram. So that is why I really love it. And maybe I can just give you one or two more sentences on what's the difference between machine learning and deep learning. And as Ayla already puts it, deep learning in simple terms is just, using a special kind of algorithm, in that case, neural networks, to solve a task. And allow me to be a little bit more technical. So deep learning is also called representation learning method, with multiple layers of representations and thus multiple levels of abstractions. So what does it actually mean? It means that deep learning methods try to learn by transforming raw input into a representation at a higher, more abstract level. So let me give you an example. So take an image. In the first layer of a, we call it layer. So or let's say in the first part of the neural network, the neural network is learning the presence and absence of edges at particular locations. And then the deeper we get in the neural network, the more abstract the representation is getting. So that, for example, in the later part of the network, the method learns familiar objects by recognizing particular arrangement of edges. So, for example, a specific arrangement of edges forms a human face or a car. And it is exactly this level of abstraction that is making deep learning so successful.
Right, thank you. And so looking at it from a challenge point of view, Guido, you mentioned that you approach this more from let's say a product or a challenge. How do you decide if this is something that you leverage AI on, or machine learning, or deep learning? Where would you start?
Well, I try everything else first. That will be my first advice, because I know them better. And this is also only half a joke, because this was touched before by other panelists. We, as a software engineers, we use machine learning mostly as black boxes. And we are left with tuning parameters, actually with parameters which work on a bunch of other parameters. And the effect is that you feel like turning knobs and hoping for the best, which is not great. You don't feel in control. And even if you get good results, then you have the problem of explaining those results. We touched also on explainability. So there are pitfalls. And so you must be careful in choosing the tool. However, that said, I would say that machine learning is very good. So we are trying to really modeling a certain aspect of human intelligence, which is our ability of finding regularities and patterns and rules in a data which is apparently chaotic. This is a great capacity of the human brain, and this is where machine learning is doing great because of its great computing power. So these are the kind of challenges where I would rely on machine learning. If I have a bunch of data and I want to make sense of that, and by looking at them with classic methods, which would be analyzing the data and trying to come up with a rule myself, and then teaching the computer the rule. So these are classic rule-based systems. Well, I take a step back and I try to let the machine figure out the rule. And we had a few examples before. Yannick explained beautifully just now what they have in common, different images of a fish. What is a fish? Well, we can start with simple patterns. So we can start with the contour of a fish, and then we can understand these are the similarities. We can start with basic features and we can build upon, as Yannick explained, towards complex features. This is a very complicated task to implement with classic programming, with classic software development. So I will go to machine learning to do that, to figure out the details and to figure out the basic features, to build upon that and to explain to me exactly why these images are similar.
All right. Yeah, that leads right into when is AI a good solution, and maybe even the more interesting question, when not. Ayla, when should I just stay away from this?
Yeah, so I think what Phila just said is really accurate. If you can't define the rules by yourself, then machine learning might be a suitable solution. But sometimes I've seen in the past that other businesses would like to optimize a problem with machine learning that indeed they can't write the rules for, so regular traditional software approach doesn't work. But if it's not a problem that occurs very frequently or in a very high volume, then it's probably not worth your effort. So that's something to be careful of as well. And you need to have access to historic data, good historic data. So if you don't have the right data there, or it's just a very weak representative of what you want your machine learning algorithm to do in the real world, then it's better not to dive into machine learning right now.
That kind of refers back to what Ben was also sharing, where they had just too little data, and the tools they were using were kind of going haywire, right? Just a lack of data, all right? And Yannick, can you share with us your kind of checklist of when to apply AI and when to just not?
Maybe when not to use AI. I think AI, and especially deep learning and machine learning, it's all about finding patterns. But I think that's not enough. So the patterns must be generalizable, so that we find the patterns in data beyond training when training the algorithms. So most likely the Corona crisis is a great example for patterns being destroyed. So people behave totally different during Coronas compared to pre-Corona. And so most likely many machine learning algorithms failed during Corona because they learned patterns which are not useful anymore during Corona. And when it comes to when to use AI to handle this challenge, I think there are lots of use cases. And maybe just to give you one of them, whenever there's a task we humans are really bad at, or well, let's say really slow at, maybe AI can help. So one example is examining the correlation between two variables. So I don't know, when we raise the price for product X, what happens to the profit of the company? And AI is really good at sifting through vast quantities of data to uncover such findings, while we humans are not really good at this at all. So we are not only slow, but we also subject to bias. So we often think there's a correlation just because of a gut feeling. But AI is much more reliable in that sense, and I think that's a really good use case for AI.
Yep, makes sense. And so we've established that we want to use AI. Ayla, at Slimmer AI, I imagine that you get quite a lot of these cases where AI seems feasible. How do you decide on the tools, on the libraries, on that kind of stuff? I'm guessing you're not rebuilding everything from scratch as we would, for example, do in e-commerce. We choose on an existing solution and we kind of start to modify that. What's your selection process there?
I would say it has really changed over the years. So I feel like when I was just getting started, we would build a lot of these algorithms from scratch, but so many good libraries have come out. And so many good machine learning models have come out in recent years as well, especially in the fields of computer vision and natural language processing. So maybe 5 years ago, we were always trying to train our own model from scratch, but that's not something you do these days anymore. You pick a model that has been created by some of these really big tech companies and that they've open sourced or that have come out of academia, and then we fine-tune those models. That's what we call them. So they have already been trained on a huge data set, and they're somewhat, for instance, for a vision model, they're good at predicting or recognizing vehicles and cars and whatever. And then our specific use case is, well, we want you to detect personal vehicles only. So then we would fine tune on our specific data set for our customer, for instance. So these days we often look at what has already been published, what kind of models are out there,
Yeah, fantastic. And this might pet peeve, but is this an open source community? Are there a lot of open source tools where the community collaborates with this kind of thing, or is it just one proprietary party?
No, it's very open source. That's what I love about the field of AI. And of course, Facebook and Google, and they all have a very bad reputation for things they've done with AI over the years. But on the other hand, I really appreciate everything they have open source, the data sets, the models, because they are helping smaller companies advance in this as well. And they're always at the forefront. Also, when it comes to ethics, they try to provide new guidelines to that, etc. I'm not saying that they're applying all of it, but at least they're trying to help the rest of society identify these issues.
Yeah, so it makes sense to maybe also gravitate towards these more well-known organizations, kind of the stuff that they put out when you're getting into it, just because of the size of documentation, community, and that kind of stuff.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Great, thanks. And then Guido, you have done various things for different solutions. What kind of libraries do you tend to use?
Well, I found that the stack built on Python and especially on TensorFlow and Keras is very good to start with, especially if you come from outside of the machine learning field. If you want to start exploring, you find a reasonably easy language, which is Python, a very good library, which is Keras, which is an higher level API built on top of TensorFlow. With a huge community and a lot of examples. And you find a nice environment, which is Jupyter Notebook. And so you have all the things and you can start right away. You have visual feedback. You can find the data sets on Kaggle. There are lots of resources. And I'm very jealous of the people jumping on the wagon right now, because when I studied at the university, well, our tools were primitive in comparison to what they have now. Yes, we have good results, well, or at least promising results. But now you can start with these tools, and right away from the MVP, you have very decent results, pre-trained model. You can reuse them. You can fine-tune the model to your purpose. As Yannick explained, in deep neural network, there are many layers. And the first layers are pretty generic because for visual AI, for instance, they learn the basic features of an image. You can decide to keep them, so you don't need to retrain that part, which is very expensive. And you can retrain just the last part, which suits to your domain. This is very reasonable to do in Keras. You can throw away the last layers and decide the classes and retrain the model, but it's quick and the results are very promising. So the short answer is Python, Keras, Jupyter Notebook is a good playground.
Great. And then would you say it pays off to kind of starting to specialize in a certain stack, or would you say no, be broad, try out stuff, play around?
Yeah, play around. I mean, there is another big library in Python, which is PyTorch, and we use it on some other tools. For instance, for another, we build incurated, we built the natural language tools on PyTorch instead of TensorFlow. There is a nice library there called OpenNMT, which we use for translating between languages and work on natural language text. So yeah, keep exploring. And these are the two big worlds, the two big families in Python, but there is more and also in other languages.
Cool, perfect. And then let's talk a little bit about training algorithms and models. Yannick, what am I doing here? Am I learning code tricks, or what is it?
So actually, when it comes to training the algorithms, you first need to at least roughly distinguish between two different types of algorithms. So there on the one side, there's so-called supervised learning, where we have data where we know the ground truth. So for example, take predicting house prices. In a supervised learning task, you need on the one side, you need information about the house that's called independent variables or covariates. So it can be maybe the size of the house or the number of rooms, whether the house has a garden. And then on the other side, you need the actual price of the house called the dependent variable. So for example, 200,000 euros. And then by providing the algorithm with lots of examples where you have information about the house as well as the actual price of the house, the algorithm then starts to learn until eventually it can predict house prices on its own. So that's all. This is under the term of supervised learning. And on the other side, there is unsupervised learning, where we have data where we do not know the ground truth, and maybe we don't even need the ground truth. We can ask the algorithm to find a structure. We can ask the algorithm to discover hidden patterns in the data without the need for human intervention. For example, we can ask the algorithm to find groups in the data, like high value versus low value customers. So I think when it comes to how to train the algorithms, you first need to distinguish between these two types of data, types of machine learning tasks. And then once you decided with one of these, whether you have a supervised learning problem or unsupervised learning problem, then you can look up what are the algorithms I can use. I mean, it all depends on the data, how much data do I have? And there are some algorithms that are really like time consuming, and then maybe having, I don't know, 1 million rows of examples of house prices is not really like efficient in the sense that the algorithm takes way too long to learn. Yeah, so I think that's a trick in a sense.
Right, and then normally where you get this training data from? Because it has to be high quality data. It's not easy to get all this data. What is a go-to source? Are there open source libraries for this? Are there what should I be thinking of?
I think it depends. So if you are lucky, you'll find some open data sources. And actually, there's a whole community about open data. And there are also other platforms that provide, like data sets for various use cases. Of course, on the other side, there are also data vendors where you can buy data. Maybe even, that is why we here at the University of Cologne, we have so many collaborations, because usually we don't have data at all. So that is why we cooperate with different companies, and they have the data, and and then we can work together. So it's really it depends, and especially when it comes to what you just said, high quality data, it's not really that easy to find it. So you need to be a little bit lucky, I think, lucky. And when it comes to the data, maybe there's one important saying. It's that machine learning model is only as good as the data it is fed with. So there are lots of things you need to consider when it comes to the data set, and I think it's out of scope to name all of them. But let me give you just one example. If you blindly apply machine learning on a given data set, it might run into amplifying biases presented in the data, such that the algorithm, for example, exhibits female or male stereotypes. For example, Google, I think 2 years ago or so, they trained a model, and the model completed the following sentence. I think it was, man is to computer programmer as woman is to with homemaker or so. So, and this is only because they used a data set which contained lots of female and male stereotypes. So it's really important when it comes to data to really consider like the quality of data. It needs to be bias free, it needs to be balanced with regard to for example, the dependent variable. So going back to the house pricing example, we need to have all sorts of house prices ranging from a couple of thousands of euros to millions of euros, but not only having houses with worth like $1 million or euros or so.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that sets me right up to segue into the next question for Ayla. When we consider AI services, data sets, something is very important, that is ethical AI. Can you tell us a little bit about that, Ayla?
Yeah, so I think this is one of the most interesting aspects about artificial intelligence, because what we're really doing is outsourcing decision making, and decisions are inherently ethical. There are various dimensions here to consider when you're dealing with artificial intelligence. So one is fairness and inclusivity, like Yannick just mentioned. You want your model to represent the people it's going to interact with. So another example is, for instance, if your data is not representative or some minorities are left out, which happens in recent years with face recognition, where a lot of the data sets contain mostly white male images. Then when the model is deployed in the real world, it's not going to be as good at detecting darker skinned women, for instance. And there are various things you can do to counteract bias, even if your data set is not representative. So you can generate or obtain more data samples, but you can also set other criterion for your model so that it can handle with this underrepresented group in your data set. But you need to be aware of it, of course. Then there's transparency. We've already mentioned a bit about explainability, and this really ties into creating trust for the user. I don't think explainability is always necessary, so you don't always have to explain why your model came to a certain conclusion. For instance, if Amazon is giving you a recommendation, you don't you're not waiting around to see why it actually did that. Sometimes it can be useful, but if it makes really weird predictions, then it can be handy if it says, you know, I'm making this prediction because you bought XYZ, and you're like, oh, okay, you're not just doing weird things in front of my face. I understand where you're coming from now. But explainability is I believe is very crucial for the developers themselves. So whenever you're training a model, I don't think it's hardly ever enough to just look at how good is it performing. So how on average, how many percentage does it get correct? But we've seen over the years that it's really important to also take a debugging step and to try to get some explainability component in your model and see why is it making these predictions on particular samples, because almost always it will give you an idea about where the model is going wrong or where you should improve the information you're giving to your model. Then there's also privacy. So we talked already about GDPR, and of course you don't want to collect unnecessary sensitive information. You also have to be very careful that your model doesn't leak any sensitive information. I think a very well-known example of that was the Target store in the United States about 10 years ago. They figured out, or an analyst figured out, that from a certain subset of products that were purchased, they could deduce whether a woman was pregnant because she would buy more unscented and unperfumed skin products. And then they started automatically sending coupons to these people. And they also sent it to a teenage girl. And her father saw those coupons and he was very upset because he thought, why are you targeting, but do you want my daughter to get pregnant? Only he didn't know that actually she was pregnant yet. So this is very sensitive information that you shouldn't just act on straight away. And you need to take that into account. There's also robustness and security. People can attack your model and then change the kind of predictions it's going to make. You have to be careful of that. There's accountability, especially if you start buying machine learning and you get this whole chain of machine learning models. Who is accountable when a mistake pops up? And I think an important one as well is societal well-being. So just being aware of what is this model doing to society instead of only making a profit. So a couple of weeks ago, there was people perceived a nuclear threat in Europe after some planes from Russia. And then the prices of iodine pills on Amazon, they more than doubled. And this can still be seen as kind of innocent and doing casual business, but when a real crisis situation hits, this might not be perceived as ethical anymore. For instance, in 2014, there was a terrorist attack in the city center of Sydney, and then Uber automatically raised its prices by 400% because that's what its algorithm does. And there was a lot of public backlash on that they were making a profit out of a crisis situation. And this is not a clear-cut case. You can also say, Uber was helping because by raising the prices, more taxis were coming. And this is what makes it very interesting. Ethics is not a field that is solved. If we knew what was right and wrong, then there wouldn't be a field of ethics. So to counteract all these things, you need to have people in your company who are aware of all these risks. So they need to know the opportunities of AI, of course, but also you need to have people who know the risks, and you need to get a cross-disciplinary team to evaluate the use cases you're trying to solve with AI. Doing risk assessments on these items are always good, and also keeping a good eye on what your machine learning model is doing in practice. So talking to your end users, evaluating. I think all of these are very important, and especially when you're buying AI, there are a couple of red flags you can take into account. For instance, if you know it is creating user profiles, just make sure to dig a little deeper. Don't just ask how does it perform on average, and don't just do a test how does it perform on average, but really look at what kind of minority groups could be in my product and how does it perform on those.
Yeah, those are very good points. And think for developers, of course, this is important if you're developing your model, but maybe even so more for us consumers of AI, or at least I think a lot of the developers here in listening to the panel, we might not develop AI, but we might be implementing the endpoints of that. What kind of a vendor question should we be asking? What should we be demanding in terms of quality and ethics from our suppliers?
Really, you should know how the model has been tested and what kind of data it has been trained on and what kind of data it has been tested on. I think that's the most important here. But from yourself, you need to know your own ethical values as a company. So you need to know what you stand for, what you feel is important. So if you don't have ethical values as a company, then you're going to have a hard time to assess whether you think an AI product is right for you in an ethical sense. Yeah, from there, I think knowing what the model has been trained on, what it has been tested on, I think that will get you pretty far already.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what I'm struggling with maybe a bit is the bias, because so what Ben from the Fish Society was, for example, saying is that they use a subset of their data because their demographic changed, but that creates a bias almost by design, right? So to what extent is that a good bias, and to what extent is that dangerous? I'm not sure if that's even a question that you can answer, but where's the line that you have to draw?
Yeah, well, so the world constantly changes. So that's one of the dangers of deploying a machine learning system as well, that we call it data drift. And what your model has been trained on doesn't necessarily need to reflect the world today, or maybe it reflected the world at the moment that you deployed your machine learning model. Like if you trained the model on pre-COVID data, it worked pretty good back then. But then COVID happened and it just doesn't function anymore. So you need to have really careful monitoring of that to see if the predictions are getting worse. Sorry, can you go back to the question, because I feel like I haven't answered it fully yet.
So when are you creating a relevant sample set, and when is it just too biased?
Okay. Yeah, so it's difficult to say, because you want to have a sample set that reflects the current world, but you know the world is going to change. So yeah, what I said with monitoring, that's the best you can do. And if you see that the performance of your model is dropping, you need to retrain it with more recent data. Of course, it would be very nice to continuously train your model every day, and in certain use cases you do that. But you don't have to for every use case. If you feel like the world is going to be pretty stable, then monitoring will be good enough just to keep a check on, is it actually still performing to the level that you did a couple of weeks ago. Yeah, but you can't be ahead of everything. Unfortunately, we don't know what the future is going to be, and we can't prepare our data sets for that. So yeah, you need to monitor and understand what your machine learning model is predicting right now.
Yeah, fair enough. Just out of curiosity, Yannick, you're still in university. Is this a topic during the lessons you're following?
You mean if we provide AI lectures, or
so
or the bias?
Is
okay.
ethical AI a topic in the lessons provided?
Yeah, yes. So actually, we just at my department we just started 1 year ago with giving machine learning and AI lectures. So and of course, one part of these lectures is of course ethics, explainable AI, responsible AI, transparency, stuff like that. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's getting even more important. You know, for example, the European Commission, they just proposed AI regulations, and so I think there's a lot of like movement with that ethical concerns. And yes, of course, these are parts of our lectures.
Fantastic.
Something I do wonder though is that it's really good that all the engineers get this training, but in the end, it will be the product managers and the business owners who make the decisions and who say where most of the attention is going to. So I really feel that there should also be special attention for people in a more product role going into machine learning to be aware of these ethical challenges, because it can be hard as an engineer to, get someone who's excited about making money with a machine learning model to take these things into consideration.
That's a good point. And that actually leads right into the last question I want to ask on this topic. Where should the responsibility lay? Because it's well that indeed you teach the engineer to not do anything unethical, but should it lay with the merchant implementing this algorithm? Should it lay with the service provider? What's your opinion about that, Ayla?
So I'm not super familiar with what merchants and service providers do in the space of e-commerce, so I find it a bit hard to answer that. But from my experience, it's good if it lies with the product team. So if the person managing the product, if they're aware of these things, because they decide what's going to be on the backlog, they decide what's going to get the most attention. The designers carry some responsibility as well, because they contribute defining what will be in the product. This is really from my own experience as building B2B AI products. I'm not sure whether it's applicable to the e-commerce space as you just asked.
Yeah, so I think service providers, like for example, a site or a speed size, right, who develop these services, it seems like they have a certain need for ethical concerns.
They do, but if you decide to buy a machine learning product, then I feel it's really your responsibility as well to do due diligence. As long as there is no good regulations for this, you just can't be sure that someone has done all these checks, and you can't personally rely on it. So you have to do those checks in-house as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right. Just to close off this panel discussion, I'd like to ask you all three: do you have any recommendations on materials to read up on how to get started with machine learning as a software engineer? I'd love to hear some of this.
I think some good learning resources you can find on cloud platforms which offer machine learning services. AWS, Google Cloud, IBM Cloud is a very good series on machine learning, so you can learn a lot. And they both talk about their implementation, so you can experiment with the API, but they also talk generally about the topic. So that's a good way, one way to start. There are many boot camps that you can attend and resources online. There is a good series on YouTube which is called Machine Learning Bootcamp. It's a hands-on series. You can start from projects, simple example. One of them is actually churn rate. So it clicked with me today. So you start with a simple project, and then they go explain the algorithm and how they implement it. So these two resources, I would say.
Cool. And Yannick, what is on your nightstand for some light AI reading?
My absolutely favorite course is it's called Machine Learning by Andrew Ng. It's on Coursera. It's when it comes to entering the field of machine learning and getting a good overview and introduction to machine learning and deep learning. This is the course to go, honestly. I think I did it like twice because it's so good. And if you even want, you can go deeper. There's some follow-up courses. And it's not too much time. It's not too dense. It's actually I find it really like straightforward to follow. So that's my first recommendation. And then you asked me where we can find data sets. And I personally believe that if you really want to be good in machine learning and deep learning, you need to get your hands dirty and you need to get some hands-on experiences. And the best way to do it is to train some algorithms by yourself. And there's a platform, it's called Kaggle. Maybe some of you may even have heard of it. And on Kaggle, they provide different data sets for different use cases. I don't know, maybe there's a human face data set such that you can train an algorithm for facial emotion recognition or so. And you can just use the data set, try to get some algorithms running. And even beyond that, Kaggle is such a great community. There are so many people sharing their code, sharing their ideas such that you can, leverage your own skills and your own code and solutions. And on top of that, you can even win some prizes if you are really, really good at it. And then my third final recommendation is actually one book we also use here in our lectures. It's called D2L. You can find it online, D2L.ai. It's a book. It's actually, I think it's an online book written by some Amazon people. And it's mostly about deep learning with a lot of code and math and discussions. And I really like it if you want to go a little bit more into detail and if you want to know the technical stuff behind all these algorithms. Yeah.
Great, fantastic, thank you so much. And Ayla, as last, what's your go-to resource?
So yeah, this wouldn't be my go-to resource, but for new employees that sign up with their company, I really like to refer them to the Making Friends with Machine Learning course on YouTube, because I love the Andrew Ng course as well. I think we got some excellent suggestions here. I think it's also important to know about the machine learning process. So not just how do these algorithms work, but how do you set up a proper pipeline from exploring your data, creating the right train and test, the validation and debugging data sets, and making sure that faults don't pop up and that you're actually doing this whole process well. personally, if I was getting into AI as a computer engineer, I think you can create more business value by just learning very simple algorithms. So no neural networks at all. We just learn how logistic regression works, for instance. And you can call it with one line of code from a library called scikit-learn. But then first dive into how do you create good data sets? How do you assess that? How do you set up the entire chain to have an end-to-end machine learning pipeline? And then once you've got it covered, then dive into the neural networks.
Great, fantastic. I'll ask you all three to email me also the links that you mentioned. I'll make sure that this goes out in the follow-up email that we're sending to everyone present here. And with that, I want to thank you all three for your time, for participating. Was fascinating. Much appreciated.
Thank you too.
Thanks, Sander.
Thank you so much.
All right. And with that, we are slowly inching to the end of our event. We do have a next one coming up for anyone interested in product information management on the 28th of April, where we're going to dive into just that, how a PIM can improve your e-commerce. That is the 28th of April, and you can sign up on the shopwareunited.com web site. And I'll now hand it over to Sanne for some closing remarks.
Yes, thank you very much, Sander. Thanks everyone for attending this afternoon. I hope you have learned something about AI. I definitely have. I really want to extend another, again, thanks to our panelists for joining us today and sharing their knowledge and making the time to come here. And I really hope to see you soon on the next Shopware event. If you have any questions or follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to either Sander or me. And otherwise, enjoy your evening. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much.